So thanks for popping in, everybody. Super short notice here. We'll give it another minute or two just to let some folks jump in. But just want you all to know, very much appreciate the quick action. I think there's been less than 24 hours since we came up with this concept and scrambled to think of one, like the topics to hit on, and two, the generous professionals like yourselves to invite. So truly appreciate all of you guys for investing the time and sort of sticking your neck out on a scary and challenging and tricky topic that nobody really knows what's happening. But I think in times like these, we want to, try and bring perspective and information to the community and the ecosystem. So appreciate you all for being here. Um, I think we can probably get into the housekeeping and then we'll get into the meat of it. So, quick sort of, comments for everyone, for the audience, and for everyone here. We're going to keep this very conversational. This is intended to not be salesy in any way. No slides, no pitch decks, none of that. We really just want to bring helpful, informative content and ideas to the ecosystem as everybody navigates these very tricky waters right now. So in the last 3 months, but most particularly in the last week, there's been a ton of craziness, I guess we could say, around tariffs. There's been different announcements. There's been back and forth. There's been pauses. There's been, continuations of different things. And so this brings a ton of volatility in really like every part of the world, obviously with markets, with supply chain, and with the amazing e-commerce ecosystem that we all live and die by. And so I wanted to, and Loop wanted to really get like some of the best and brightest in the ecosystem together and dig into these topics and share, all the great knowledge that you guys have and tips. So we'll quickly just like go around, do some introductions so everybody knows who's who, and then we can dive right in. So very quickly from my side, my name is Marco De Paulis, Director of Partnerships here at Loop. I will toss it over to Jennifer.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jennifer Hernandez. I'm the Director of Operations at BK Beauty, and my scope is everything from planning and forecasting, total supply chain, all the way through the end customer. So this has been a very fun couple of weeks for me, for sure. And I'll pass it to Andreas.
My name is Andreas. I work in fulfillment logistics and customer experience at ThirdLove, the women's apparel brand.
Chris, you want to jump in?
Yeah, sure. Chris, former operations director at Gymshark, where I oversaw the full um, distribution of orders, 40, 50 million units a year. Now consult for brands all over the world who are trying to scale their supply chain operations. So, like Jennifer, I have had a very intense last couple of weeks.
Guess that leaves me. I'm Chad. I'm the CEO of Good Company. We're 3PL for mostly D2C and partially wholesale businesses. I also run a Slack community of 100 other 3PLs, and I like to spend my days in spreadsheets. So lots of conversations going on right now and trying to keep our finger on the pulse of these developments.
Amazing. Absolutely perfect group of operational prowess. So let's get it kicked off. I just want to start with something a little bit like more broadly and would love for everyone to hit on this for a minute or two. So how have the tariffs affected your roles, your company in the last week? Jennifer, I'm just going to start with you again. You're at the top of my list, and then I'll start mixing it up after.
Yeah, so for context, so we sell makeup brushes predominantly, and up until February, makeup brushes were actually completely duty free. You cannot produce makeup brushes in the United States. Uh, Therefore, this is all very new to us, and new to me, and I've become a trade compliance expert sort of overnight. Um, we, as of today, are facing a 165% tariff against our product, which is not ideal, of course. We had inventory scheduled to leave our supplier on Monday, that we ended up asking them to hold indefinitely until we understand what uh, the, the impact of this is long term. Our hope, obviously, is that this will, optimistically go away. And if not, just at least go down. So every single day we're looking at how holding the inventory will impact our business, how long we can hold the inventory. We've maintained a really great relationship with our supplier, who understands our position as well as all of their customers' positions. And it's just very fluid. We're just taking it day by day.
Thank you for that. We'll definitely double click on the holding of the inventory piece because I think it's an interesting tactic. Andreas, are you able to give a minute or two overview of just how things have impacted you in the last week or so?
Yeah, so our product wasn't duty free, but a lot of apparel brands and footwear brands in general had already been making the move from China to diversified countries. I think what really threw a curveball at us was the other countries that got hit by the substantially high tariffs. And it basically became a situation where there is nowhere safe to go. So that is really the challenge on the sourcing side, I think. And we had been talking to trade compliance experts this entire time, and really their worst case scenario that they laid out was that there will be high tariffs on a lot of places and there'll be no place to go, which it's kind of a double, it's two dual emotions that come from that. One is terrifying, but the other is liberating, because if there's nowhere safe to go, there's nowhere safe to go, and you can't really make a bad decision. You
Hmm.
can't judge the landscape incorrectly because there's literally nothing to do.
Right.
Now, obviously, those trade policies have changed a little bit since then, and the countries that we diversified into away from China got their tariffs reduced a little bit. So thankfully, we're not in the same position as other companies that have their entire supply chain dependent upon China. So that's positive news. On the flip side, though, we were a 321 distributor, meaning that we have some of our inventory in Canada and we distribute it into the United States using Section 321. That I had already made a decision before the new president was even elected that we were going to roll that back and we were going to move everything to the United States. But now the issue is that because the tariffs are so high, the cost benefit calculation of bringing all that distribution back to the United States changes. So it's
Hmm.
almost a day by day, week by week calculation that we have to make. How much longer does it benefit to keep 321 going? Do we basically wait until 72 hours before it's over to stop 321 distribution,
Right.
or do we move things back sooner? If you're talking about the Vietnam tariffs that we have right now, and Sri Lanka tariffs and East Asia tariffs, it's not that discussion's easier because the tariffs didn't go up substantially high enough that it would wreck my strategy, but the China tariff did. Right. So, and we still have legacy China inventory that we've moved away from that sourcing, but that doesn't mean we still don't have a lot of inventory that from before our shifts that is still in Canada and trying to figure out what to do with that.
Yeah. Yeah. Tons of nuance there, especially with the de minimis change as well. Thank you, Andreas. Chris, how about for your clients and what are
Yeah,
you seeing in the last week or so?
sure. It's been a really interesting week for myself, working with about 12 brands who are in some way impacted by these changes. I think the one thing I've sort of learned is that no one's impacted positively by this. I work with some brands who they are 100% US, they source in China, they are 100% US, they've outsourced China. They are international brands who source in China or don't source in China. And
Mhm.
like whatever maths you do there, the outcome is basically, their costs of goods have gone up. I know there's a brand who they've invested a load of time and money in sourcing in Cambodia. They had real, you know, credible beliefs that Cambodia was not going to be impacted by this at all. Um, Cambodia doesn't work for them now. And actually, they're at a point where, they were happy paying a little bit extra in Cambodia because of the duty benefits they got, and they've pretty much all gone overnight. So it's a real difficult place. There's a load of people who are asking, what do I do? And, no one really has an answer. I think my advice I've been trying to say is everyone's going through these problems. You've got to hope at some point, the market will correct itself and it needs someone to make that move first. They're most likely going to be one of the big players. It's do we up our prices? Do we absorb the cost? Like,
Mhm.
how we take the hit on margin? Do we diversify out to the US? Do we, all these things that everyone's asking for an answer, and it's really hard to answer that question because the answer you give today might be different tomorrow. Like
Totally.
I have a bit of a side bet with someone that I think the China tariff could be 200% come Monday. And it's these next couple of days are going to be everything's changing, so it's really difficult, which is tough for everyone. But everyone is going through that. And like I say again, I think the one thing I learned pretty quickly is no one has benefited from this last week so far. And
Yeah.
I think it's important to understand that and maybe have a bit of perspective when you think, oh my God, my business is going to go overnight, and what am I going to do? It's like everyone feels like this in one way or the other,
Yep.
and you know, you've got to hope that the market will correct itself. If that's prices rising, if that's they come to an agreement, you know, I guess it's unknown at the minute, but it
Yeah.
does seem what is the current situation today is probably not sustainable going forward. So
Hmm.
somebody's going to have to give. It's just who gives in first, I guess.
Helpful. Yeah. Maybe the only ones who can benefit are the ones gambling on the changes here. Um, Chad, anything from your side quickly?
Uncertainty is at its highest point ever, and I think that that is driving people who want to be proactive to making decisions they're scared they're going to regret, which is let's give up on the 321 program now. Let's move product. Let's pay a higher tariff just for the certainty of having inventory during sales periods now. In the long run, I think that I'm looking at the VIX right now, which is the volatility index,
Hmm.
and it hit an all-time high like 2 days ago at 66%, which is insanity. It generally hovers
Yeah.
around 50. Um, the the sheer uncertainty has my phone ringing off the hook from companies who are looking to get stateside
Yep.
absolutely as fast as possible, which is a tough spot for everyone in the industry to be in. Hastily
Yeah.
made fulfillment decisions, picking up and transitioning your operations is
Hmm.
never a good idea in the least volatile of times. But I think everybody's faced with no choice. The
Certainly.
kind of divergent thoughts that I'm observing though is sales trends are still strong. We've got clients who are being intentional about dialing back ad spend to give themselves a bit more runway of the inventory that they own at a more reasonable cost of goods. But as far as gross market demand, we haven't
Hmm.
seen anything. And generally, when you see the VIX
Interesting.
high, it's ahead of an election or it's ahead of some other uncertainty. And it
Yeah.
scares the top 10% of earners with the maximum amount of discretionary income into
Right.
just slowing purchases down. And we're not seeing that. I
That's interesting. I haven't
only
heard that
time's
yet.
going to tell, but I don't know. I don't know if that's a sign of lack of concern or awareness, or if people are buying before prices are going to
Right.
go up. Um, I can't be
Probably some
certain.
of that. Probably some of that. Super interesting. Okay, yeah. So the way that I'm thinking about some of these questions here, at least for my brain, is like back end operations and then front end customer experience. So I think good segue. I'd love to hear like one or two levers that brands might have to reduce some of these tariff associated costs. And that could be through, logistics partners or some other sort of opportunity. Is there anything that comes to mind if you think about like some levers to pull to try and mitigate the impact of tariffs on an e-commerce brand?
Yes, the number one I would say is to look if the cash flow burden of product that is on the water that is about to hit is just going to sink your company, then look at even temporarily at a bonded facility. There's two options. It's bonded or free trade zone. They're
Mhm.
practically identical with the exception of free trade zone is a heck of a lot more bureaucracy for in an e-commerce company's position, not much net benefit, especially if you're not doing much finished goods manufacturing stateside. For e-com companies who are sending finished goods into a 3PL, they should temporarily at least look at a bonded facility. If you have inventory that turns over relatively quickly, the reality is sometimes you're paying tariffs before they would have actually been due. Because you've got a little bit of runway when you import goods. But if you are saying, all right, let me stockpile this and let's wait this out just a little bit and see if I might be able to draw back some of the duties or maybe even
Mhm.
send them out of the country if it's going to reach that point, then a bonded facility allows you to defer the duties for up to 5 years. That's more than enough runway, I think, to wait out and see um, what the what the real intent of the tariff implementation is. And not to belabor this or get too political, but I think it's been demonstrated that this is Trump's weapon of choice to accomplish a whole host of other things. And it has a lot less to do with trade imbalance necessarily. And this has just kind of been the excuse to implement things. And without understanding the full geopolitical agenda, I just think that buying yourself some time is probably the ideal solution.
Yeah, that's a great tip. Probably we'll see a lot more of those services pop up from 3PL providers.
Yeah,
Anyone
I,
else?
I, I talked about how we're rolling back our 321 strategy in anticipation of the de minimis going away, and that is still strategically what we're doing. But if there's inventory that we don't need, let's say in the next 3 to 6 months, we may keep it with our current 3PL, with our current 321 3PL in Canada, so they hold on to it because that duty gets deferred. The Canadian government defers that duty, and then obviously it's deferred from the United States. But the question there is, what if I do that, and then, like somebody on the call says, I do that, and then the tariffs go up after,
Hmm.
right? Because so we had this situation where when the original 321 when originally 321 was ended on a Saturday afternoon, and then it was rolled back 2 days later. I had asked our planning team and the folks on my team to move 6 months worth of China country of origin inventory into the United States. And we were working on that. And between the time we were working on that and the time we did it, that additional 10%, if you remember that a few weeks ago, seems like it was 5 years ago, but it wasn't. It was
Hmm.
just a few weeks ago when the random 10% was just added. And we raced to get it over the border before that happened. And unfortunately, we had a massive failure from our trucking partner where we showed it as having we showed it as tracking through the United States because our facility is in Vancouver. We showed it that it moved over from Vancouver to Washington and tracked across the United States. But actually, the driver was doing a trans-Canadian drive over to Toronto and then gave the freight to another driver who then took it over the border. So unbeknownst to us, while we thought we had a week to get it over and we were going to be fine, actually we ended up getting it over after that 10% hit, and then we were hit with that 10%. I
Wow.
was really upset about it. I lost it. But unbeknownst to us, that was the least of our concerns, right?
Right.
That extra 10% on one truck. And now I think to myself, well, maybe I should have moved everything that was China, country of origin China, instead of just the 3 to 6 months. So it's really hard to make these decisions. The other thing that could happen is that I can now, once the 321 goes away in a few weeks, we're going to move all of the inventory that has the lower tariff rate on it. What if the administration makes a deal and those tariffs go to zero? Now I just paid 25% on all of that
Hmm.
stuff that I moved from Canada to the United States, and then it's zero after. Are there refunds that you can apply to? I don't know. I would hope so. Probably not, but that would be a hope that we would have. So it's really, I think somebody said everybody's losing money, and I wouldn't say necessarily that all the companies are. I mean, everybody's going to take a margin hit is probably the best way to put it, right?
Yeah.
And I think the question is, does that margin hit destroy your business or do you survive it? And I think that's the question for a lot of people. And Jennifer said that they're not accepting freight. There's a lot of other companies that are not accepting freight out of China too. What happens when half the stores are empty? That's what I
Hmm.
want to know. And I think and if somebody said that we're not seeing too much in the actual consumer spending happening right now, in 6 months, stores are going to be empty, maybe even sooner than 6 months, depending on how just in time people's supply chain are. When that happens, how's that going to affect everything and everyone?
So maybe this is a good time. Thank you, Andrea. Super helpful. Should we start thinking about changes to production?
I think the problem is that you don't know where to go.
I agree. I'd go back to my point. The brand who I've been working with have invested like millions of dollars in Cambodia. Felt like the safest bet. It No one saw that coming, and
Yep.
changing production doesn't happen overnight as well, right? I think that's the biggest
Yep.
problem. You know, I think there's a lot of brands who have spent a lot of time and effort diversifying out of China,
Yep.
probably led by COVID. But those brands don't feel significantly better off today. I guess long term diversifying out of China probably makes sense, but I think to Andreas's point, it still doesn't fix the fact that brands are going to take a significant margin hit.
And that only really works for industries that have diversified out of China. Because I don't remember where everybody works on this call, but I don't think any of us work someplace where we move industry, right? We're not Nike. We're not a company big enough that can say we're moving an industry. 20 years ago, I worked for VF Corporation, and they actually worked with a China-based company to move factories to Vietnam and to the Dominican Republic in particular to move the footwear factories. Well, VF 20 years ago could do that. None of these D2C online brands like the ones that I work for are big enough to move industries from one country to another. We can follow, but we're not going to be the ones that are going to set up a factory in a different country.
Yeah.
For what it's worth,
Understood.
I have a reasonable degree of confidence in Vietnam. I spoke to a distributor yesterday who specializes in bringing international companies into the U.S. market, and they had some pretty high-level trade partners in Vietnam. The political, what's happening behind closed doors there is that the Trump administration is applying pressure to Vietnam to increase tariffs on Chinese goods that are finished in Vietnam right now. The easiest loophole for a Chinese manufacturer, and the vast majority of manufacturers in Vietnam are actually Chinese owned for the same exact economic reasons as they're trying to skirt sanctions. So the Trump administration is saying we will reduce those tariffs from Vietnam if you will increase tariffs on Chinese goods, which I think is a great intermediary there to relieve the pressure on both sides. And I think it demonstrates a long-term confidence in Vietnam being bolstered as an industrial supplier to the U.S.
I wonder what that does to the Vietnamese economy, though, because they need cheap goods as well. And it's funny, I was having a discussion with my mom yesterday, trying to explain to her a little bit about tariffs and where Cypriot, from Cyprus, we're Greek Cypriot. And she said, she goes, you go to Cyprus, and she said during COVID, she sent my aunt a package, and she said my aunt had to pay duties on the package because we take a luggage there every time she goes of gifts, and she's like, so I sent what I would normally take, which I wasn't able to go in a package, and she had to pay duties on it. And she said, isn't that unfair? Why do they do that? Why does the EU and the Cypriot government duty a package that I sent to my family? And I said, that is unfair. But the reason why the people in Cyprus don't buy American goods is because you don't buy American goods. Who of any of us on this call is wearing a piece of apparel clothing that was made in America? Probably none of us. So how's Cyprus, a country that's not rich, supposed to afford the American goods? So I don't know how that's going to work out for the Vietnamese if they say, don't buy Chinese goods. We buy Chinese goods. Like, how are they not going to buy Chinese goods? So I do have your optimism that a deal with Vietnam is going to be made, but I guess it goes back earlier to my point. That's great for ThirdLove because apparel's already an industry in Vietnam. What's Jennifer going to do? Right? If they don't make makeup brushes in Vietnam, I mean, I'm sure, Jennifer, you're really great at your job, but I don't think you're moving an industry either.
No, and I think like one of the things that I wanted to convey in the call was to partner with your existing suppliers and work together. I think like we're all, like as mentioned at the top of the call, we're all in this together and we're all trying to find solutions. So rather than try to reinvent the wheel on your own from your tiny brand, see what your supplier can leverage. Can they store things for you? Can you hold production maybe that you already had planned for the year? Help them just kind of understand where you are and ask them how they can help because their success is reliant on our success as well. And so they're motivated to help their customers.
Agreed. Yeah, and they're in the same boat, right? They're trying to figure it all out as well. So, So Jennifer, let's keep it going. I want to shift to like the front end to your customer experience. How are you thinking about presenting these changes to your customer base? Whether
So
that's
our hope right
communications, pricing,
now,
things like that.
yeah, we are really, really, really hoping that we will not have to increase prices. I think it's premature to do that at this moment because,
Sure.
as we all know, I mean, we've been away from our phones for 20 minutes. It's possible that everything is over and we don't even know yet. Doubtful, but it, it's too premature to make changes such as that. In the short term, Chad mentioned that some of his brands are reducing ad spend. We're doing the same on a SKU by SKU level to see where our inventory runway is and where we need to extend in the event that we aren't able to ship anything from our supplier in the next 30 days or so. Um, we that's BK Beauty's position right now. We're hoping that the customer will actually see no impact. I've seen brands that are starting to increase pricing at the item level, or maybe um, upping their shipping costs, or maybe the free shipping threshold to drive AOV. There's a lot of different strategies out there. For us, we're just trying to kind of hold tight to see what things are going to look like long term, and hope that we don't have to pass this on to the customer. But at the end of the day, when your cost of goods, essentially triples
Mhm.
to where we're standing today, that won't be sustainable into 2026. So for now, it's a sit on our hands, hurry up and wait, think of
Sure.
every possible solution that we could implore as
Mhm.
things continue.
Chris, if you were to fast forward 90 days, the tariffs are still here. What would you advise your customers from a pricing, messaging perspective?
Yeah, I mean, I think the point about not making the reactive price, like, a lot of brands, the stock's already in the US, they haven't had to pay the duties on that. So panicking, saying, I'm going to increase my prices by 20% tomorrow, that feels a bit overkill. And, again, I know I saw something on LinkedIn that said it would have been last Friday and Saturday were the two biggest days of global Shopify price increases. So, I think there's some panic there. I think if nothing changes in 90 days, there's no way that the prices cannot be passed on to the customer. I think to Jennifer's point, either or you become a busy fool and make no money or lose money. So if nothing changes, I don't see a world where prices don't increase. I think there is that that doesn't feel like a long-term sustainable option. I think something's going to give. So, if you have new stock coming into the US and it's either too late to pull it out or actually, you know what, you need it to drive the sales, maybe that needs to come at a higher price. But for brands who've got stock in the US today, um, you do have a bit of time on your side. And again, I think, a Nike, as we said, like someone who can move an manufacturing industry, they'll also probably the ones that make the first move on this, right? And,
Mhm.
almost let the big players see what they're doing and then follow suit or don't follow suit. But if you just up prices today because you're panicking that your costs are going to go up in the stock that's coming in the next couple of weeks or months,
Mhm.
conversion will drop off today would be a safe assumption to make, and it would feel like a rash decision. So I think it's, hold fire, pay a load of attention to it. I would imagine in 90 days we have a lot more understanding of what's going on, and we're probably out of this every day something's changing. But yeah, I think the market will lead that for us. Right now, I would hold firm, and I really hope in 90 days that I think the tariffs will have normalized, whatever normalized means. I think will probably be an increase on where we were. I think the biggest thing for a lot of brands will be that actually the de minimis will either, you know, it'll definitely be lower than $800, and it seems like it's going to be to zero. I think that's when it's going to be a bigger challenge for people pricing, but that would be for brands who are shipping internationally rather than brands who are shipping into the US. So,
Right.
all that, no one's really even talking about that at the minute. It seems like the focus is all on tariffs. So,
Right.
um, I think and I hope there'll be a lot more clarity in the next couple of days.
So, as someone from the return side of the industry, I'd love to ask, and maybe Andreas, we can start with you. Are you thinking about returns policies and how to evolve those with all the changes here?
Yeah, I'm not going to give away our strategies here and what changes we're going to make, but what I
Sure.
will say is that in general, I think that if you were thinking of other changes that you wanted to make to your business model to drive revenue, that was not just based on price, and there are different policies that companies have, and you were already thinking about it, and maybe you were 50-50. This puts you over the edge, right?
Yeah.
So if you were like, I want to change my free shipping threshold, I want to charge for returns, I want to reduce the returns window, a
Hmm.
variety of things that you were going to do that you see brands doing already. I want to use the loop offset, that you guys are really pushing in the industry. I
Hmm.
think now it's harder internally for folks who may not have liked that idea to say, no, I continue to not want to do this, because everybody realizes that now might be time for a change. So even I would agree with Chris. I don't think it's necessarily a good idea to necessarily raise prices right away. And some brands might not even raise prices at all. But I do think that there are some ideas around the margins that policies have been changing in the industry.
Yeah.
And I do think that accelerates this. And that doesn't change, right? You're not going to change those policies back. So I do think that there are those levers that people will be looking at using.
Yeah,
Certainly.
the one thing I would say on returns is, especially if you're an international brand, and there's a couple of brands who I've been working on with this, try and get a policy that if you ship goods into the US and they're getting returned, keep them in the US. The one thing that makes no sense now is to be shipping goods from the UK, get it
Yep.
returned back, and there are plenty of 3PLs that can help with that, and the way you manage inventory and multi-location fulfillment in Shopify, it's never been easier to do. So I would really advise any brands who have a international shipping into the US and have a any returns rate, to be honest, set a rule pretty quickly that once stock goes in the US today, it never goes out because paying duties back and forth could get really expensive.
Yeah, great tip. Anything else on the return side, Jennifer or Chad, quickly, as we're at the top of the half hour mark? All
Nothing
right,
on
so
our
I have one final question then for everyone. Quick one. Who is a person or a publication or some sort of a resource that you guys are paying very close attention to stay on top of all the tariff updates, all of the trade updates here?
Dude, God bless Ryan Peterson of Flexport and
Hmm.
Aaron Rubin of Ship Hero,
Ship
who
Hero,
I
yeah.
am a super big fan of. I would be also remiss to not call out Matt Hertz of Second Marathon and more importantly, Third Person. You can go to thirdperson.co, especially if you're looking to like get a consolidated, refined list of 3PLs who might be able to help with the bonded facility, or you've got to make a quick switch and you want to increase your likelihood of success. You can have fast, good, and cheap, and you can choose two. So if you want to make
Right.
a good decision, I think that Third Person will help you get cost effective and a good partner quickly. I know that I'm watching Matt sent items email every Sunday, which and just ahead of this call, I was looking at Aaron and Ryan's Twitter for like the most up to date
Mhm.
information. So that's
Yeah, they're
definitely
great.
where I'm looking. Yeah.
Helpful. Thank you.
I would agree
Jennifer?
with
Oh, sorry.
I was
Chris,
gonna
you can
say
keep it
I
going.
would agree with Chad with that, and also I think it's a real important call out that there's a lot of people who are posting stuff that really isn't credible. So I think having a small, concise list of people that are recommended, and not just trying to grow a LinkedIn following and get
Totally.
engagement is really important. So I think, yeah, the guys that Chad's saying is the same people that I'm following and reading their Twitters as well. So
Aligned. Perfect. Jennifer, anyone you recommend?
Well, so I have stayed off Twitter mostly just for my own mental health. But Matt, as mentioned, is a wonderful influence, and I enjoy following him closely. And then I just have a few close industry friends. Like I have text threads where we're just talking about tariffs like all day, every day, and they're finding, we're each sharing our own sources. Andreas and I run in a couple of the same circles, and we're talking about tariffs all day, every day as well. So less of the more global influences and folks that are posting on social media and more the boots on the ground, people that are understanding how this is affecting our individual companies, like at a more
Mhm.
granular level. I think that has been more valuable for me.
Do you have a community that might be open that you would recommend for folks to check out?
Andreas
The
is the
parabola
leader of the
community.
Parabola
The
community.
parabola community is a pretty
Yeah,
open community.
yeah,
Awesome.
Parabola's
Andreas,
pretty.
anyone else to add?
Yeah, so folks said Ryan Peterson. I agree with that one. Actually, because I don't do drugs, I just check Twitter every 5 minutes, and that's my high. And
That's a
he
high.
actually, it's a hit.
Well said.
And he just said that President Xi is going to Vietnam on Monday. So that's why I
Hmm.
am optimistic that we're going to get a deal with Vietnam, but I'm less optimistic that it's going to be some kind of box out China deal where they put like high tariffs on China because I don't think that the Xi would be going then. So yes, a bunch of folks on Twitter that these our friends on the call already talked about. Another, I like the Odd Lots podcast because that's not really like breaking news date, minute by minute what's happening, but it helps give more of a perspective on how all of this affects the financial markets and what things you see in the market might indicate that the administration is going to change its policy. Like I had no idea it was going to end up being the bond market. Who thought that? Right.
Right.
I'm sure some people thought that, right? But probably not most supply chain people, right? Probably we were looking at the stock market and we were like, oh my God, it's down 20% and no one seems to care. This doesn't seem like a good thing. But the bond market has a freak out overnight and then everything changes. And by the way, the bond market is continuing to have a freak out, which is why I have confidence that these policies aren't the final policies, because that seems to be what they focus on. And if I didn't follow the Odd Lots podcast and the hosts of that, I wouldn't know any of that.
Yeah, great recommendation. And yeah, very, very good point. Phenomenal. Well, thank you all so much. We're just a couple minutes over, but can't say thank you again enough for your time and the commitment here. We're going to share all the insights here with everyone, in our audience and our ecosystem. Loop also has a tariffs blog page that we're keeping things as updated as we possibly can. So if anybody wants to reference that. And then some folks here are our partners, and we have a big, broad partner ecosystem as well. Consultants, 3PLs, agencies, you name it. So if anybody would like any references or is looking for some support, we can absolutely connect folks with the best in the business. So that's just partnerships@loopreturns.com. And me and my team will personally help you guys out wherever we can. Thank you all so very, very much. Again, Jennifer, Chris, Andreas, Chad, you guys are fantastic. And I hope everyone has a great rest of your Friday and a great weekend, and good luck with everything going on. We are sending the best wishes and positive vibes your way.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thanks so much, everyone. Take care.